I want to talk about filters. I'm Jason Odell. Um, my Substack is The Photographer's Perspective. And if you're subscribing, no matter how you subscribe, free or paid, I appreciate it. It's really cool. Smash that little heart button thing. It's supposedly a good thing for the algorithm, right? So I want to talk about filters in terms of fine art photography because it's a lot of people think you need a lot of filters, and I want to dispel some of that. Also want to talk about the differing quality of filters in the you get what you pay for department. Okay, so let me talk about the filters that are out there. Um, for a long time, especially if you're doing film photography, and really, especially if you're doing slide film photography, which was very unforgiving, um, there were some filters that were important. So I want to talk about polarizing filters. We can talk about neutral density filters. We can talk about UV filters, um, and then there's special effects filters that I never even touched. But at one point, you had your star filter, and they would do different, diffractions and things like that for fun things. So I want to just start off by saying that the reasons that we might have used filters 20 plus years ago, some of them are still valid. Some of them have been completely made um, um, obsolete by software. Okay. And so there's certain things you can do with software that gives you very similar effects. You don't need a color intensifying filter for the most part, because you can intensify the color in your post processing software. Okay. So lots of good stuff there. So let me just start off by saying, here's the filter. It's still in the box. You know why? Because I never use these. I never use a UV, or as some people say, protective filter. Why is that? They're just not very effective at what they're supposed to do. It used to be there was like with film, you could sort of cut through a little bit of haze. It had a little bit of a tint to it. These filters are just most of the time really inexpensive, cheap pieces of glass. And you have to remember that your lens, your camera lens, is a very expensive, highly engineered piece of glass. And the front element on most lenses is often, quite thick. They're extremely resistant to chips and breaking. That being said, people like to put these filters on there to, quote, protect them from things. Now, it is true. I would say that if you're going to be in an environment where maybe you have a lot of salt spray or blowing sand and you want to protect your lens from that, valid, okay. Um, but the way I protect my lens most of the time is just by putting my lens hood on when I'm taking pictures. Because honestly, I bump into something with my lens, the lens hood is going to take the brunt of that, not the filter. The filter, they break. They're very thin. The UV filters, they're very thin. And if the filter ring, if you were to smack your lens and somehow dent the filter ring, now you've got a filter that uh, can't come off, won't unscrew off your lens. Bad news. Okay. So I don't use the UV filters. And let's think about it. A lot of times you'll get a UV filter free when you buy a lens. Um, that's kind of like the old days when if you I liken to that to you got a toaster when you opened a bank account at your local bank back in the day. So you don't want to put a cheap piece of glass in front of your lens unless you've got or any piece of glass, I should say, in front of your lens, unless you have a good reason for it. And that's what I try to articulate to my clients. If you're using a filter and you don't know why you're using that filter, or it's because I heard they could be useful, you need to take a step back and think about why you're using the filter. Okay. Because if you don't know what it's going to do, a lot of times it can make your images look worse by adding in reflections and unwanted distortion, even if it's a really low end filter. So these days, there's only two filters that I will carry around regularly. The first one is a polarizing filter. okay, like this. And these polarizing filters are, you can turn them. They have a ring and they rotate. And the kind you want to get for digital photography or any kind of, actually, any kind of DSLR or even film SLR, any autofocus camera, there's a they are called circular polarizers. There's two kinds. There's circular, there's linear. Linear polarizers, I don't even know if you can get them anymore. You probably could. But the circular polarizer is what you want. And I would say like right there, circular on the thing. And the polarizing filter is it's going to block scattered light and only allow light in one uh, direction, one wavelength or waveform direction to come through. And that can be useful. It can also be problematic. Again, it depends on how you're using the filter. So if you're using a polarizing filter, there were two reasons why you would use one 20 plus years ago on film. The first reason is that it can enhance blue skies and add contrast in a sky, make clouds pop. That's still true, but it's not really necessary if you're using any kind of modern post-processing software. You can use vibrance, you can use dehaze, you can use contrast, you can boost the contrast and color in the sky. The polarizer can actually get you in trouble with skies, and that's because the sky, the direction of the light will affect how strong the polarizing effect is. This is just nerd stuff, but if you are pointed 90 degrees from the sun, the polarization effect will be maximum, darkens the sky the most. If you're pointed towards the sun or with the sun at your back, the polarizing effect is minimal. Now, if you're using a medium, focal length, 28 to 30 millimeters or longer, it's not a big deal. But you start going into those wide lenses, those super wides that we have, the 16 to 35s, the 24s, and all of a sudden your angle of view gets so wide that you're capturing parts of the sky that have different intensities of the polarization effect. So you'll have a dark patch in one part of your image and a lighter patch of sky in the other part of your image. And that looks bad. And I'll tell you from experience, when you do that, it's really hard to get rid of. It sucks. It's just not easy to fix in post. So if you're using a very wide angle lens, something, 24 or millimeter equivalent or wider, be really careful with your skies because it's going to potentially screw things up. So in those examples, I'd rather not use a filter at all and just take the picture of the sky and I can enhance things in post. But there is one thing that you cannot do in post, at least not in any effective way that I found, that a polarizing filter can do. And that's remove reflections from glass or glare off of water. And in that respect, it's very useful. Now we're in the fall time right now, or it's October here in the Northern Hemisphere at least. And that means fall colors are coming, or in my case, they're already here. Leaves on trees have a waxy coating on them. It's to help keep the moisture in. But that wax reflects and scatters the light. So if you use a polarizer, if you're using a polarizing filter for fall colors, it's going to cut through that glare and it's going to make those colors pop through. And that's not something that you can easily do in post. You can also, of course, use it for removing reflections in water. That's a very typical effect with the polarizer. Now, somebody asked me a question. What if you're doing a wide angle shot and there's water in it and a sky? Now you've got some compromises, some challenges to make. So you got to be really careful with that. I've not found that solution yet. When in doubt, not using a filter is less likely to screw up than using the filter. The other kind of filter that I use is a solid neutral density filter. I think I have one of those here. And these, it's got a little dust on there. These are super dark. Okay. And I use these to get long exposures in bright light. You put this thing on your camera, it's blocking two, three, four, in this case, 10, even 15 stops. And guess what? Um, you need a much longer exposure to properly expose the scene. So, solid neutral density filters are quite effective for getting long exposures. Now, just a second here. The other kind of neutral density filter that you might have heard of is something called a graduated neutral density filter. That's a gradient, starts dark and tapers out. And these were generally square or rectangular pieces of glass or resin. They required a filter holder to mount to your lens. And these were extremely popular starting in the 80s with Galen Rowell made them extremely popular because it would hold back a bright sky against a darker foreground, like in early morning landscape photography. And that's still true. They'll still work, of course. But again, you are potentially causing more problems than it's solving. Uh, Digital cameras now have a lot more dynamic range than slide film ever did. Think slide film might have had like depending on the kind, 5 or 6 stops of dynamic range. These DSLRs now, some of them have 14 stops of dynamic range. You just don't need it if you expose properly. You can get this back in post, especially if you shoot in RAW. So, and then once you put a filter holder on, you can't really use your lens hood anymore. You just run into all kinds of other problems. You can get reflections. And if you don't line up that gradient exactly right, it can cause artifacts and weirdness in your image that you're going to have a hard time getting rid of. So I don't use them anymore. In fact, I got rid of all of my graduated NDs. Okay, so the only two filters that I'm really using now are my polarizer and my solid NDs. I got a 10 stop solid, a 15 stop solid, and I have polarizers in various sizes. So what I want to talk about now are, how to choose a filter. The very first thing you're going to do when you buy a filter, you're going to say, I don't want to spend a lot of money on a filter because it's just a filter, right? Why should I spend a ton of money? I get you. I hear you. But if you're serious about this, you got to think about some things. The first thing you should look for in any filter is to make sure that it's what's called multi-coated. So these are optical coatings, anti-reflective coatings that they put on the glass. It's just a higher step up. So whereas a basic polarizer you might be able to find for $20, $30 or less even, the multi coated one might be twice that. It might be $40, $50, $60. Okay. And then you get into some higher end ones. And what are you paying for? You're paying for the better coatings, you're paying for better glass, all of those things. So I want to show you a couple of polarizers. And this is just a really inexpensive polarizer. I think I got it free with purchase of something. And what you can probably see here is that it really, really reflects the light. So any kind of light hitting this, it's going to scatter and it's going to cause a little glare. So this is a very inexpensive polarizer. Like I said, I didn't buy this one. If we compare this to my much better polarizer that I've probably bought 10 or 15 years ago, this is a Nikon polarizer. It's got anti-reflective coating or multi-coatings. You can see that there's still that glare. You get that green color that you see with anti-reflective coatings, like if you wear glasses like mine, and lower reflection. So this is much better. Okay. This filter, I just looked, this is going to cost you about $139 at B&H. Just saying. So a little bit painful, but way better glass, less likely to cause any issues with softness or artifacts or whatever. Now, the ones that I'm currently using, and I just upgraded my filters, is this one, and this is one from Breakthrough Photography. It's also got multi-coating. Okay, so it's even better anti-glare. Still got a little bit of reflection, but really nothing like the other two filters that I have, especially compared to, to this one. You can really see the difference. Okay. But the biggest difference, and why I was willing to shell out, $140 in my own money for this filter, and this is from Breakthrough. You can get them from them. You can get them on Amazon, whatever you prefer. Is that these have even better coatings and they're hydrophobic. So let me show you a little bit about what happens. So I got my eyedropper here, little Mr. Wizard time here in my office. And I'm just going to put a drop of water on this filter. Okay. And I don't know if you can see that. There we go. Get it in there. See, it kind of just smears around a little bit. And when I try to wipe this off, it's going to smear like that. And the same thing is true with my Nikon filter, which is, like I said, is a good filter. It's not like it's bad, but when I put the water drop on there, it just kind of smears itself a little bit. See that? Okay. And what I found was when I was shooting in Oregon at a waterfall, where was all this spray hitting us, is that not only was my filter getting covered with spray, but wiping it off was a real pain because it just smeared. It wouldn't remove. Now let me show you the same thing with my breakthrough filter. Put that water drop on there. Look at this. It's got a hydrophobic coating, and this little water beads right up. And if I want to wipe it off, I just wipe it off, and there is no smearing. Worth the extra money? Yeah, that's your choice on that. Nobody wants to spend a lot of money on filters, but if you use them a lot and you do outdoor landscape photography around waterfalls, which you want a polarizer for a lot of the time, it's good to have the multi-coated one with the hydrophobic coating. So there's two brands that I personally buy. The breakthrough ones for the polarizer, and for my solid NDs, I've been buying these from Kalari Vision. They're a company that mostly specializes in infrared conversions and filters. These are probably coming out of the same factory as the breakthrough ones. They've got nice brass rings, all the multi coatings and the hydrophobic coatings. But I buy these for my ND filters, neutral density, because they not only block visible light, but they block infrared light at the same filter factor. Whereas with other ND filters, if you do anything with IR, infrared, then sometimes that 10-stop filter might only work like a 6-stop filter. So the Kalari filters, they call them their IRNDs. They work both visible, both infrared. Now, if you're not shooting infrared, who cares? But if you only had to buy one, I'm buying these because I know I can use them with either of my camera systems. So this is what I'm using. So you get these, and they're like way over packaged. We can do a little unboxing video. Woohoo! So they come in here, and then you get all these extra cases, and you open it up, and there you go. There's the filter in there. I get rid of these. I just put these in a different filter case. So speaking of filter cases, there is one kind that I really like, because I want to be able to keep all my filters together. And that is, I just bought a new one, the Think Tank filters case. They're called the Filter Nest Mini. This is my favorite little thing. And what they have 4 compartments in here, color coded, and you can put up to 4 filters. I think they'll hold all the way up to 82 millimeter filter thread, and they smush down, so they're pretty compact. They just take a slot in my camera bag, and so I really like these. I've got them I have a bunch of these because I'll put like all of the filters of one particular filter thread size in one of these. So here's like 72. So in here, I'll have my 72 millimeter polarizer. I'll have my 72 millimeter 10 stop ND goes in here. And then in the back, I have my 15 stop ND. And just for fun, I even threw a little microfiber cloth into the front. Some of these nicer filters, they'll include these really good microfiber cloths, yay, when you buy the filter. But anyway, so those are the filters that I use: polarizer, solid NDs. And I use them for specific purposes. My polarizer is to remove glare. My solid NDs are to extend my shutter speeds, to make them long exposures. If I'm not shooting in those kind of conditions, the filter comes off my lens because I don't need any additional glass surfaces in front of my really good optics. So that's basically what I've got for today. So it's all good. Again, I appreciate you all for subscribing. If you hit that little heart like button. It sort of shows up, I guess, on the video. So Substack likes this. Just quick note that I sent out a post to my subscribers. You may have seen that I've got a photo safari in Newfoundland coming up for next June. Can only take 6 people. I've already filled 4 spots. So if you're interested in that, there's only 2 seats left for this. It's to go photograph puffins. The northern gannet colonies in Cape St. Mary's is like 10,000 or more nesting pairs of northern gannets. All kinds of really great stuff. Plus, you've got the lighthouses, the sunrise, the landscapes, the coastal fishing villages, all the stuff in between the puffins and seabirds. And we're going on a Zodiac trip to go look for humpback whales and get in on them. So very cool, very exclusive photo safari for June of 2026. Thanks again for joining me today. Again, I'm Jason Odell, and if you haven't subscribed, I appreciate you subscribing to The Photographer's Perspective here. Thanks again, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.